Welcome to Deer IQ, here to help you hunt smarter, elevate your approach, and consistently tag exceptional whitetail. Whether you're just starting out or a longtime hunter targeting mature bucks, this is your edge. We bring you proven tactics, expert insights, and unfiltered conversations with high-level hunters who just get it done. Guiding you through it all is veteran hunter and strategist Adam Lewis, helping you spot what others miss, fine-tune your focus, and unlock your full hunting potential. So let's raise your deer IQ. Here's your host, Adam Lewis.
Okay, we are in a special episode here, a high IQ topics episode, which is really just looking at it's a separate from our normal series, which right now is mobile hunting, but it's a kind of a right now type topic that's people get a lot of benefit from. And I'm joined with Ty Easley, and we're going to talk about the topic I wrote about recently with the blog. The bucks aren't showing on your trail cameras. Now what? So you put in a ton of work. You've put down the mineral, the mock scrapes, whatever you put out, and they're just not showing on them. So what does that mean? And what can you do this time of year, which it's late August right now. So kind of the August, September timeframe before season hits, and maybe you're worried about it or you just don't know what to do. So before we get into that, though, a couple of things to tell you about. First is the Season 3 quiz, which goes with our normal episodes. You can take it, which is really goes with our episodes. And the guests, what they did was throughout the season coming up here, they brought some questions. So you can take the quiz beforehand and then watch the episodes and look for the answers there. The second thing you can do, I suggest, is the Deer IQ Test 360. If you are looking toward your season and you really want to just shore some things up, this is a diagnostic to kind of tell you some areas of weakness, some of your blind spots, areas that you can tighten up to just focus on to have a better season. And it spits out and gives you basically a report that tells you where to work, where to focus for the best results, and gives you suggestions. So that's a cool, really helpful thing. You can check out the Deer IQ Test 360. All right, well, let's get to it. Ty, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always good to talk whitetails for sure.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And we were chatting really on Messenger, and I was like, man, I should just have Ty on if he can to talk about this, because there was a lot we were bouncing back and forth that might be just interesting and helpful to talk about with people, right? And again, is that time of year you put in a lot of effort in the summer, putting out trail cameras and things, and deer just aren't showing. For example, down in Ohio, earlier in August, put out a bunch of cameras, and one, unfortunately, was there about a week, and it was getting a ton of pictures, a few small bucks, a bunch of does. This was over a mineral site. And then a raccoon decided to climb up and knock it over. So I'm just getting pictures of the ground on that spot. Not much I can do. Not much I can do about that.
You can't drive right down the road and
right.
Fix it, right? Yeah.
Right. So I've got to wait a while to fix that. Another spot, though, down in Ohio, nothing but does, right, for the last month. And it's like, okay, what, you start thinking, what I do wrong is, is there no bucks in the area, all this stuff, right? So that's kind of the question, and maybe what people are thinking about and wondering this time of year. And then there's some guys that, you see pictures and they have tons of these monster bucks on their cameras, So what's the deal? So when you run into that, Ty, let's start here. What does it mean to you when you see those things? Frustration or maybe elation, depending on the side of the fence you're on. What do you think, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, kind of like what I read in your thing. I mean, the biggest thing is don't get frustrated. Obviously, it's not hunting season. You're not on a property, even if you're not getting pictures of deer. It's more of a personal thing than it is anything else. There's plenty of season. There's plenty of time for deer to move in. So don't get too aggravated if you're not getting pictures right now. But what I can say, to typically, like you were saying, you got those buddies that are sending you a picture and they're like, oh, I've got, 5 shooters on my farm. Oh, this is going to be the best year ever, which is, yeah, that's
Is
exciting.
it?
There's no two ways about it. It's exciting, but more often than not, those 5 shooters are not going to be all on that farm, come November, come late October, early November. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just the way it goes. The most dominant, not even the biggest rack buck may not be there. It's more often than not going to be, your most dominant, aggressive whitetail that's going to take over that area. So, but for me, like I'd message you, I've had over the years, I've ran into this a lot on different farms, and obviously food and water sources throughout the summer. If it's a hot, dry summer, they've got to have some water nearby, even though they get, majority of their water and their moisture out of the food that they eat, throughout the summer. But if all the plants are dried up, then they're going to need a water source. So water's huge in the summer. And then obviously food is always big, and that's always changing, especially if you're near ag fields, if you got corn or soybeans. But then even you can break it down even further than that, even because for example, I've got I've 2 cameras on a big soybean field. It's probably probably a 20-acre soybean field, maybe a little bit bigger. I'd have to, get on there and measure it for sure, but roughly 20 acres. So pretty good sized soybean field. And it runs along a pretty, road that's traveled pretty regularly. So I hate really that it's that visible from the road when it's soybeans. I love that farm when it's corn, because then nobody knows what deer are on there, and they're just they live in the corn then. I mean, and you can hunt right on the edges, and it's just a lot more productive for myself. When it's soybeans, it's great for visualizing deer in the summertime. I've gone out there 2 or 3 times this summer and shot some velvet footage, and I mean, there's tons of bucks out there. There's probably, what I consider, probably 3 solid shooters, and then multiple. There's probably, when I recorded the first night, it was probably 15 to 20 bucks and another, 15 does. So a lot of deer in the field. And my idea was to put a camera up over a mineral lick, and I put this in as soon as I knew it was soybeans. I went in and I actually set a stand off this point, put a mineral lick up, and was trying to hopefully pull these deer 150 yards away from where they typically come out by the road, which is where the creek's at. It kind of runs along there, but they like to bed back in there, kind of back by the road and where this creek runs. And with that said, I thought, well, I'll pull them up and get them away from the road with this mineral lick. And I didn't put any corn, which maybe that might have been a little bit of a game changer. I don't know, but I just use a mineral lick because I have pretty good success on getting velvet footage over the summer. But with that said, I hardly got, and I mean, I was getting some doe pictures and a few buck pictures, but considering what was in the field within 75, 50, 75, 100 yards of that mineral lick every night, I was not getting near the amount of pictures that I thought. And so if I was going on that intel only, just the pictures and the camera, that I got, I would think, a nice buck was passing through once every 2 weeks. But I know that, I mean, I drive by there, I scout it from the road, I scout it from the tree. I know they're in there nightly. So with that said, don't ever get too discouraged. It's really important. Kind of like with food plots, I'd talked before about, making a plot for specific deer. It's very important to set up your minerals, your cameras, your scrapes, whatever you're going to try to, get intel on the deer. Set it up where they're at. I mean, don't try to pull them. Don't try to maneuver them. I mean, you can manipulate, I think, a little bit with obviously food plots throughout the fall on a deer's pattern a little bit, but over the summer, when they're bachelor grouped up like that and they're hitting like a big ag field, a big bean field, and you better figure out right where they're coming in and out of it. And you're going to, you'll usually bid on them. If you're trying to put it 200 yards up, trying to pull them to you, it typically doesn't work like that. And I've had more, I mean, I've got some other instances we can share, but I want to do all the talking here. So.
No, that's fine. Yeah. First of all, like summer, obviously you can't hunt, right? So the whole point of it is kind of seeing what's there, right?
Mhm.
At least part of it, right? Seeing what's there, and they're kind of in this mode where they're lazy. It's hot. They don't want to move very far. They don't have to, right? And we're kind of talking about ag here, right? Woods, ag, that type of situation. But they don't have to move far. And they're really pretty restricted to like, hey, I do this. I go over here and bed. A lot of times they're going to bed really close to the food, and then they're just going to walk straight out there, right? It's really patternable this time of year. And like you're saying, if you're not right in that route, you might just miss them, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty eye opening when you realize that, that
Yeah.
you can't just draw them over. They're getting what they need, and they don't need what you have there, at least at the moment. So that's the first thing. You can be off by just a little and not get anything.
Yes. 100%.
For example, a couple years ago now, maybe 3 or 4. So I'm in Michigan. I was hunting down in Ohio, and there was another guy hunting this property that had permission, and he put a bunch of this big food source. He just kept feeding in this one end of this field. And so I kind of stayed away from him, and I had a feeder down there I just left, which was probably 150 yards down the field in a spot where deer usually came out. And I just put it there just to kind of have something for the deer. And I had a camera on it. And during the summer, I was getting, random pictures of deer, nothing real big. And every now and then I'd get a picture from this guy through the landowner, right? So I didn't really know him, but he'd share them with the landowner. The landowner shared them with me. And I'm like, I'm not seeing these deer at all. It's like 150 yards. And they're like hammering his pile of corn and molasses and all this sugary whatever stuff he had there. And I didn't get this picture. He wound up shooting the first week of season this really nice buck. It was like the palmated 160-inch deer. I didn't even know that deer existed. And I had a camera within 150 yards of where this deer was at a lot. And he had daylight pictures of it at this, food station. And the thing basically was going back on this ridge and bedding and coming out and feeding and just doing that short trip early in the summer or, late summer and early fall. And he never even made it down, on the same property within 150 yards. So they can get like that, especially when they're older, and just kind of really restrict, their patterns, especially when they don't need to. So that's a big thing. Yeah. Don't get frustrated this time of year. And another thing I'll say is if, when I was younger, I'd say I might get frustrated and like question what I'm doing or whatever. But when you start looking at the big picture and go through enough seasons, you're like, I'd almost be more worried if I was getting a bunch of really big buck pictures, because when that happens, they usually disappear by the time season hits. And I have a hard time finding them, right? So I'd almost rather be in the situation where I'm not, because then I'm like, oh yeah, maybe something will move in, to my area. So there's good and bad to that, but there's a flip side to that coin. If guys are kind of frustrated about it. You said you had another story with that. The idea of making it easy on the deer, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I had one, just the same deal this year. Went out and scouted another farm. Hadn't hung it. I'd actually, so there's kind of this is a big farm, another farm with 2 ag fields. Obviously, summer scouting, velvet footage. You want to get in a place where you can see a long ways and see everything on the farm. Well, this one's separated by a creek, 2 big bean fields, and the larger bean field, the one that I typically hunt, that they're usually in, I see more of the bigger bucks, larger age class deer in this field. I went and watched it one night, and there was a lot of bucks in there, but the most mature deer in there was like a bachelor group of 2 and 3 year olds. And I'm like, there's got to be a big one somewhere around here, right? So when we're leaving, we're coming out and going through the other field. We got to leave to cross the creek and then go into the other field, and boom, there they were. They were in the back of that field. Which is another kind of interesting topic of a lot of people don't realize. Generally, this time of year, your age class whitetails will hang out together, the bucks. So if it's typically you won't see a 5 and 6 year old hanging out with a 1 and 2 year old deer. I mean, usually they're those 1, 2, and 3s, and then maybe 3, 4, and 5s, or 5 and 6. And then sometimes you get the deer that don't want to, that just not sociable. So like I always say, you learn a deer. The more years you get to hunt a deer, the more you learn about that specific deer, which is what is the most intriguing to me, how they are different, how you do learn the different patterns and the different, little quirks and things that they like, how each individual deer could be different. But going back to that, we saw where they were at that night coming out, and it was right off this point. Next day, midday, I checked the wind, had a good south wind right in our face, slipped in there. And I was being like I was telling my dad, don't touch anything. Let's slip in there. Let's hang a camera, scent free as possible, get in, get it out, because I could see this being, they got these soybeans in late. So I see this being, we open up September 15th, which in Missouri, typically farmers get their soybeans in sometime between the beginning of June, late May, should I say, all the way up into July. This field didn't get planted until almost the beginning of July, right around there. So the beans shouldn't turn until right about the beginning of October. They'll probably start turning yellow depending on weather, obviously, but probably not till the beginning of October. So I should have about a week to 2 weeks, maybe, that first of the season, that they could be on these soybeans. So we slipped in, hung a camera, and I should have hung a cellular. I didn't. I hung a regular camera because that's all I had at that moment, and let it sit for, I think, 3 weeks. And I went in and checked it, and man.
Think you're ready for deer season? Take the Deer IQ Test 360 and find out. It pinpoints blind spots and weaknesses in your strategy so you can fix what's holding you back and focus your effort on exactly what gets results. It's quick, insightful, and delivers personalized suggestions based on your unique hunter profile. If you want to consistently tag better whitetail, the Deer IQ Test 360 is where to start. Take it now, linked below or at deeriq.com.
Hey, Adam here. If you're new to the podcast or have watched or listened for a while now, I invite you to take the next step and join the community of high IQ hunters, or those wanting to be. There's lots of ways to do this, including following us on Instagram. We're pretty active there. Joining our weekly newsletter full of high IQ deer hunting tips and tactics, and also services we offer to help hunters reach their full potential. The easiest way to start is this: follow, like, and subscribe, and rate and review if you're listening to the audio version. That's it. It really helps the channel grow and is greatly appreciated. Check all the ways to connect in the show notes below, and while you're at it, share this episode with a buddy you think will like it.
And let it sit for, I think, 3 weeks. And I went in and checked it, and man, there were bucks. I mean, 5 different bucks over 4 years old, on that camera, and then a few 3-year-olds. So they were in there almost nightly coming through there. And I pulled it just far enough away from their bedding to where I wouldn't disturb anything going in with the right wind. And but yeah, just a classic case of, and I'd been running a camera over in that big field for the most of the summer. This was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago when I hung that camera over where I saw them. But I'd had a camera 3 weeks before that over in the big field, which was 250 yards away, and not one buck picture of a 2-year-old. That was it. So placement is like you're saying, they're lazy. It's hot. If they got water, they got food abundant, and they got browse. That's the other kicker this time of year.
Right.
Even we all focus in on, they're coming to the beans. They're only eating beans. I mean, they can stand up and eat browse all day long, and work their way in it. They don't necessarily need, to be in a bean field or a corn field. They got plenty of food this time of year, which is another reason. There's just, they're not looking for the ladies. All they're looking for is, water and food and just survival. So.
Yeah. A couple of things you said there, which could, like, if guys are having problems with their cameras, it could also be issues. One is, being right on top of them or not, right? Not being afraid to move a little bit, like make these micro adjustments like you did to try to just get some pictures. but being super careful about it, right? Like when you go in there, especially if you think they're going to stay in that pattern for the beginning of season, being super careful about what you're doing to collect that data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think some guys, and I see it out there a lot, I won't mention names, but I see it everywhere. Videos, social media, whatever. They are, leaving a bunch of scent, making real obvious trail camera placements and stuff. And for me, it's like, man, I don't want to give them a chance to know I'm watching them. And the third thing you mentioned that stood out was this idea of knowing, in this case, the crop rotations, right? Like I've driven by fields and I was out glassing and driving around the other day, and you got bean fields that all look very similar, but there's like a pile of deer in this one and none in this one. And you're like, there's something different about that field.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be it. Maybe it's when it was planted, or there's just, I don't know, something about it.
Water source closer by, those things are big contributing factors, I think, especially when it's hot and dry.
Yeah. And so if you, like you just said, know and can kind of take a look at properties and know when the beans were planted in this example, that can help you predict maybe, where deer might be or when the beans might be huntable, right? Because maybe right now they will stay there, but they might not, depending. So Michigan is October, so I got to wait quite a while.
Yeah, that'd be tough to hunt a bean field in October.
Yeah,
very few will stay that green unless we have the Eagle seed beans that I plant. They stay green probably till middle of October. So those give you that little bit of longer edge on soybean field to hunt them when they're that they're still feeding on the leaves. But
Yep. So some good stuff there to think about. Every situation is going to be different, and guys have to analyze what's going on in their situation. But those are pretty important. Those are things to think about there.
I did have one other instance of years ago on a buck I called TB2. It was a buck that hunted for years. It was a 6-year-old whitetail. I knew him pretty intimately. I mean, I knew this deer very well, what he summer did, where he's at in the summer, where he's at in the fall. I'm on almost to like specific time of year. I'd found 5 of his sheds. I mean, I knew the deer really well. And when he was 6, I set out trail cameras where I'd been getting pictures of him previous years throughout the summer. Didn't get any pictures of him. So now in my head, oh man, did something happen to him? I found his sheds, but I've had that happen a couple times where you find a mature deer sheds and they vanish. So I can only assume they died, or I have a hard time believing they completely moved on just because they spend their whole life 5-6 years there. I would assume I would get something of them at some point in time. But another, like you said, literally moved a camera up over a hill 150 yards, literally 150 yards away, and immediately started getting pictures of him and another mature buck that he was bacheloring with. So it just, the location is huge. So don't be afraid to move cameras around, if you can do it the less intrusively, obviously. And if it makes sense, but don't overlook scouting with binoculars. We get so hung up, and I'm sure you've had, multiple talks about this. We get so hung up on trail cameras, and I'm guilty of it a little bit too. I let it dictate maybe sometimes too much. But this time of year especially, there's no time of year that whitetails are more visible than, to me, in July. June, July, early August, really middle of August, and then they may start kind of disappearing a little bit. But yeah, if you can get out there and glass, especially those bigger fields, even if it's a big clover, big alfalfa, big soybeans are huge around here, they feed on. But that's probably the number one thing that I would recommend. If you can't find the deer, then don't be lazy. Get out there and hit the road and start glassing them fields that last hour or 2 hours before dark every day.
Yeah, it's basic stuff like that, but it's way more efficient than trying to put down cameras and stuff and to be able to glass a whole field. Did you, with that buck you were just talking about, did you figure out why you think he was slightly
So
shifted?
yeah, I think for him, I think it was another dry. It was back in 2012, I think 2012, 2013 when we had those super dry years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was again close. He had moved closer to this creek, and I'd actually had a clover field up there, but he always seemed to hang out on the east side of the property more throughout the summer. So that's why the years before it told me that's where it was at. But he just, with it being so dry and we'd had that clover plot in there, and then I, moved the camera over there, and yeah, it didn't take long, put the over the mineral lick, and he was right on it. So I just think he was a lot closer to the river over there. I think he was bedding down in the river bottoms, coming up the ridge, and then hitting that, top colder field. Of course, everything was so dry, like I said, up top even. But yeah, just minor moves. And it's hard because you don't want to be too intrusive. You don't want to go in there and, have, camera up every 10 yards, especially that time of year, because their core area is little and it don't take a whole lot to bump them out. But in the same breath, you're not really hunting them that time of year. So I don't know. You can probably get away with that a little bit, but uh, yeah, I think it's important to me. The biggest factor would be just don't rely on the cameras. Make sure you get out there and glass where you can glass, and because that's the most least intrusive anyway. And really pay
Mm-hmm.
attention. It's easy to watch a field of 30 deer and will be like, wow, there's a lot of deer, and you just get overwhelmed on, oh, there's deer everywhere. Well, you got to really be paying attention, because what I've noticed too is I'll watch a tree line, you know what I mean, and I'll go in, and it gets down to that last week, right? So now I'm like, okay, he's still hitting this. I gotta be ready when he does this. Am I gonna go in, maybe get lucky and get a rain or something, and go in midday when the wind's right, hang a stand, and then hopefully wash scent away, if I can get a heavy enough rain, or, be a scent free, or B, am I gonna wait till the day of, slip in there midday, hang it and hunt it and try to kill him that afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem I've ran into on that is I've watched those big ag fields before, and you get over to where you think he's coming out, and you see, I don't know, 3 or 4 trails, and they're 60 yards apart, and you're like, dang it, now which trail did he just come out on? And you think it sounds stupid until you get there, and you're like, wow. So when you are watching those ag fields,
Mm-hmm.
really like pick trees that he's within, because
Yeah.
things look a lot closer. Like it might look like he's coming out 20 yards from that tree, and you get over there and he's really 40 yards, 50 yards from that tree that you were thinking. So yeah, pay real close attention to where he's entering and exiting the field. And obviously, most hunters know they don't always come out on the main trails. A lot of times it'll be that secondary trail, not the as beat down one where most of your does and stuff are coming out on.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Um, what would you say then? If guys aren't getting on one for that first week, or maybe it's a later type season hunt, and it looks like the first week, I guess, maybe isn't going to pan out. Um, what would you say to that? Because maybe we can get into a little bit here that article and what we talked about last time, which was episode 32, if I didn't say that, with Ty, where we talked about 1 buck kill plots, and prepping, I guess, ahead of time for where you can potentially kill a deer. I think it's one thing to early season, try to plan on like a quick strike that first week or so.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't work out, then it's like, because they're going to shift, right? Especially if it's like a food source, like beans or whatever, like you're saying, those dry up. There's only a small window where they're still on some of these summer patterns, especially like where I'm at. We open October 1st, right? So, sometimes they're already off those summer patterns. Just depends. But what then? Like what kind of do you look for then if that first type hunt doesn't totally pan out?
So obviously a couple factors. One, we don't all have the ability to, to hunt as much as some of us get to. I mean, I'm fortunate I have a job that I'm able to, slip in after work and hunt quite a few evenings. And then a lot of people, it really depends on, I guess, what you're looking for. Is this person going out of state and only getting a week to hunt there? There's a lot of those. But if I'm kind of talking more situational, where this is an area somewhat close to home where you can hunt it off and on pretty much all year, and you can kind of decide maybe when you want to use your vacation time, and or when you can and can't hunt it. But so my kind of thought process throughout a season, real quick, here in Missouri, anyways, the first week or two of season, I'm on usually soybean fields. Typically, maybe unless I got a clover plot that's producing, or if we've had really good rains, and one of my food plots is producing deer. But even then, usually I'm on more big ag fields that first week or two, trying to catch that last late summer pattern buck. He's just being a little lazy. After that diminishes, it's usually right about October 1st, which I feel for you, because I could almost never catch a buck on a late summer pattern all the way to October 1st. It'd be really hard here. But right after that, typically the acorns are starting to drop, usually right about the beginning of the season, which a lot of times pulls our bucks off of the ag fields, I believe. The white oaks, the bur oaks, the acorns start dropping, and they haven't had them all year, and they're just gold mines. The problem with those are they're everywhere around here. I mean, it's literally, you got to be lucky. The great ones are the ones I love the most, which I just found one the other day, is a giant oak, white oak on the edge of an ag field that's loaded
Yeah.
with. You put that scenario together,
Yes.
now you got a combination where you can key in
Yes.
on. If you notice that, get a stand in there as early as possible where it has time to settle down. If that's going to happen. Uh, but those kind of, so usually the acorns are usually from September 15th to about October 15th. Obviously, they feed on them throughout the whole fall, but
Yep.
that's when you're really keying in on your acorn crops. Right about the first week of October is usually one of my favorite times, is my kill plots, the clover plots, how I killed Dreamer, how I killed Hijack, just a number of deer we've been fortunate to get a crack at on those clover plots. And it's usually about the October 7th to about maybe the 20th October. You get a cold front that coincides with a good um, deer movement, and over a clover plot or alfalfa or any green plot, those small kill plots, where they feel safe close to their bedding, where they're kind of establishing a little bit, but they're still more into food at that time of the year and really
Yep.
bulking up, obviously laying the rubs down. So yeah, that's probably my favorite now anymore. I think I've killed probably more of my biggest deer, which is funny because that back in the day, that was always the October lull. Like, that was the worst time of year to be
Uh-huh.
in a stand, would be, the beginning first couple weeks of October. But that's when I've, had some of my best success on big deer. So then after that, obviously the rut kicks in, and then food's out the window for the most part. I mean, obviously you can hunt where does are feeding in doe bedding areas, but then after that, obviously right about end of November, that last few days of November all the way through December, back on any food source. If you got late season fall plots, turnips, radishes, um, you know, standing corn, the killer, if you've got that availability. Uh, but yeah, that's kind of my thought process throughout the year. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hunt that way pretty much every year, but every ag fields change, so you got to pay attention to that. Sometimes this acorn trees don't drop every year, so you got to pay attention to that. Um, and it's just scouting and staying on top of it. And just the previous year experience. And then each deer is different. I mean, some deer, for whatever reason, likes this side of the farm. And then this deer, for whatever reason, likes this side of the farm. So you just learn those. And like I said earlier, the more you get to hunt a specific whitetail, the more you learn about him. And the more, honestly, every year, the odds slowly tip into your favor. And I feel like, that's why you do get a chance to, if you can get them that old, which is hard. But if you get fortunate enough to do that, then you usually got a by the time they hit 5 and 6, you got a pretty good feel for what that deer does year after year.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I guess the focus, I might have taken us off focus a little bit, but
Yeah,
I
probably.
don't think I don't think I did though, because the idea of, not being able to get bucks on your trail camera, it's like seasonal. You're following food sources in the season, right? So if you get that messed up, you're probably not going to get many, trail camera pictures. And it's about knowing that for your area and being able to stay on top of things. And then, just realizing that cameras don't see everything, right?
100%.
But the more
Yes.
you know that stuff, the better. And, you mentioned that your early season, the hottest spot that you like. I thought of a spot immediately that used to have permission to hunt, don't anymore. But when they planted these fields in beans, it was just these fields next to a woods and some bedding, and there was just fence rows that kind of crossed out in the field. But when they planted it in beans, and especially a few years if they planted it late, and these fence rows were full of these really big bur oak trees, man, that was just dynamite. I mean, the deer were coming out for all that stuff, right? So, and it just drew deer like a magnet, right? So finding stuff like that, even if it's like you can find one of those big oaks out in the middle of, somewhere in a field, or
Yep.
it can be great, right? So,
Yeah, for sure.
all things to look for. Yeah. Any more thoughts on that? So we talked about, first of all, just if you're not getting bucks on camera, just waiting. You can just be patient and wait it out, right?
I mean,
Because
if you've got the does there, eventually a buck's going to show up. I mean,
right,
there's going to be somebody there that's going to want to breed that doe. So, I mean, if you got the patience, and obviously, some people don't have they may only have a 10, 20 acre farm to hunt. So, if they're not on your property, there's nothing you can do about it at that time. Like behind my
right,
house, great example. Last year, I planted soybeans and corn. I had a great bachelor group. I mean, 5 different bucks that were all from 3 to probably, well, I'd say 2 to 4 years old, but a couple of pretty decent bucks, nothing giant, but I got to watch them all summer. This year, nothing's behind my house. So I don't know if they planted a bigger ag field back east of me, and there's maybe a big bean field back there, and that's where they're feeding. I'm hoping that's the case. Maybe that's where they're feeding. And then, but like I said, I got the Eagle Seed multi max beans in this year back there, which stay green all the way till middle of October. So, I'm hopeful that I know a few of those deer made it. So I'm hopeful that they get on me, but they haven't been here all summer, which is it's pretty rare for me to not get any pictures of a nice buck behind my house throughout this whole summer. And I haven't had any. So, yeah, if it's a smaller area, don't fret, don't get too worked up about it. I know it is hard when like you said, all your buddies are sending you these giants. You're like,
right.
I got nothing. But also, like you said, yeah, wait till the rut comes around, because then you might have the majority of them on you. But that's always part of the fun. So
Yeah, so you can just wait it out, and you might not have to wait very long, right? When bastard bucks, the groups break up here, mid-September ish, let's say, even maybe starting right now. You're going to see some shifts. You're going to see deer start moving around and popping up. For example, I think we talked about this before I hit record, but hadn't seen, if I already said it, apologize here, but hadn't seen anything on camera in Ohio in a month. And just today shows up this nice buck, all bloody, just shed his velvet. Hadn't seen him at all. So I'm guessing that shift is starting, possibly as we speak here. And those deer will just start moving around and showing up, right? So they might show up on your camera if you just, sit tight type thing. You could move it a little. And, again, knowing the area and knowing, is this an early season spot or not? And that those things shift, especially with ag, like in my backyard right now too. Really nothing back there, but there's ag around that's drawing them. So it can shift and change pretty quickly here. Anything else, Ty?
Yeah, one other kind of interesting thing I've noticed over the last, I've paid attention to more over the last 5-6 years. Obviously, really kind of maybe longer than that even. I don't know, it all starts running together. But I always talk about individual bucks because obviously that's my vice. I love, kind of targeting specific deer, but I'm still watching these other ones grow and what they're doing because they may be that deer that, here in a few years that I'm, you know,
Yep.
really focused in on. But I find it interesting. I had a buck last year that I was after really hard crossover, big 170-inch deer, and he showed up on this farm at 3.5 in December. I don't really remember him before that, but I remember him in December, years ago at 3.5. And I wasn't quite sure. I'm like, okay, is this a 3-year-old? Is this a 4-year-old? Debating on even because my dad hadn't killed one that year. I was like debating on trying to hunt him with him. I'm like, we're going to give him another year. And he was there a little bit off and on in December, just a few pictures. I look back, no pictures of him the year before. And I started building history, so I know this now. The next year, I got some more pictures of him. He didn't show up again to next year until November. I'd had one trail cam picture of him that morning. He showed up. Didn't know it at that time because it wasn't a cellular camera. But he shows up in front of my dad and I stand and comes in, and he's 155-inch deer. Hadn't seen him. I'm like, it's during the rut. I'm like, this is a roamer buck. I'm like, green light, shoot him, Dad. He comes up. My dad's got a crossbow, and he's didn't notice it. His bolt was off the rail. Deer stops 12 yards, shoots right over his back at 12 yards. And I'm like, oh no. So the deer takes off. So I go home that night and I'm literally, I bet 3 hours. I'm like, what deer is this? What? Because he's got splits. I didn't know what deer it was. And I'm going back to the footage. I'm going back to trail cameras. And finally, literally probably 3 hours into it, I'm like, I finally come across that deer and I'm like, it's got to be him. The frame was the same, but he was just a clean 9 point the year before. But then all of a sudden at 4, he starts growing splits and longer brows. And then the following year, but back to what I was getting at, he wasn't there a whole lot. He showed up for a few times here and there, but it was almost like he liked the area, but he was getting run off. He got in a fight that morning right before my dad missed him with a buck, Terry Jr., that I ended up killing the next year. And this buck was a year older. And I only assume he lost. Don't know. I couldn't see it. I could just hear him crashing at about 60 yards through some cedars. And anyways, so the next year he shows up, and now he's a 5-year-old, a little more dominant, right? And I notice him, okay, now he's on the farm more. Now he's like, I feel like he's taking the area over a little bit, but not crazy amount, but a lot more than each year is a little bit more. Then last year, he shows up in October. I got one picture of him in July, like 24th, if I remember right. And he blew up. I mean, he's like 170s, low 170s now, just a giant. And don't get any more pictures of him all summer. And then all of a sudden, boom, he shows back up October 27th, the same morning my son and I are going in to hunt. And this episode's coming up here on Heartland Bowhunter. It'll be the last episode of the year. But anyways, so I won't give too much, but it doesn't really matter. But anyways, he shows up that morning. Somehow we decide to hunt this stand that he was mostly by the last year that he was bedding by. He somehow slipped around us in the dark. I don't know, before or after we went in. So I get a picture of him on this side of me. We're hunting the stand here, and then I get a picture of him later in the morning on this side of me, and I'm like, hey, are you watching back there? Are you sleeping in the back of this tree or what? Somehow he slips by us, and he daylights by this other stand, and I'm like, gosh darn it. So that just opened it. And then he was there. I had a picture of that deer, if not every day, every other day for the next 3 to 4 weeks. He lived on that farm. Like, he took it over. So my point is, let me make a long story longer here, is some bucks I think will want to be in an area, but if there's other more mature, more dominant bucks in that area, they may not stay in that area until it's their time. And then they're going to take over that area. So don't ever, I guess learning on that, I don't ever count a whitetail out. You know what I mean? Like, just because he's not there all the time one year, and he's big, maybe next year's his year to take over that area. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, this year you got the stash, so that is on your side.
Yes,
it's going to happen.
I didn't wait till November to grow it out. I'm doing it early.
Yeah, get it going, man. Well,
yes,
A lot of good stuff for guys to think about. So if you are having problems getting bucks on your trail cameras, do not fret. What's one last takeaway, Ty, or summary, if you could boil it down to one thing here?
Scout, man. I mean, it's always out to scouting. Just don't get lazy just relying on your trail cameras.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get out there
Yep.
and scout and just pay attention. I mean, just pay attention to food sources around you, because that's, probably 75% of the season. That's what's going to drive them, where they're going to be eating, where they're going to be bedding. Those are the two things, or they're going to be the biggest, contributors. So if you can pay attention to those details, I think you'll be all right. Don't, like we talked earlier, don't worry about them not being on you right now. This isn't the time, but it'll happen. There'll be somebody that moves in. So
that's for sure. And my tip would be maybe, if you analyze that stuff and you could make a small move, but maybe just sit tight, right? Like right now, I just had that one show up in Ohio after a month of nothing. So they're going to be moving around. So thanks, Ty, for coming on and sharing and continuing our little chat there from Messenger. And so tell us what's going on with you here, the last little bit here. So Heartland Bowhunter.
Right now I'm just praying for rain. I've done a lot of, my wife and I went out this last weekend and worked on some fall plots. And I think I mentioned earlier, the last few years, they've been just super dry here in the fall. And, I talked about my favorite hunts, favorite time of year is typically those first couple weeks of October, on green plots. And if there's no rain, nothing's green. So, then I'm going to have to rely on going back a little bit deeper into the timber and trying to find acorn trees. So, but yeah, we're just kind of gearing up for season, just trying to get ready. I'm hopeful my son didn't get to hunt. He was chasing me around with the camera all season last year after that buck crossover. And I finally ended up killing another one at the very end of the year. It's kind of an interesting story. If you get a chance, watch that last episode of Heartland Bowhunter. It'll be here. It's a few weeks away, but yeah, I told him already, I was like, he's never killed a deer with his bow. So that's number one on the list this year for me, honestly, is my season will be made if he gets to go out with a compound and put an arrow in one. So
awesome. Well, if you're listening, check that out, and we'll continue here next time with our normal series. We're talking about mobile hunting. But again, Ty, thanks for joining.